My name is Ken Snyder, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm not too active, but if you're interested in the slides or the GitHub that actually has the code that we'll demo, these are the addresses. And you may, I don't think you can even see it, but the little Google developer group icon is on the slides and on the actual demo, because I gave this talk in LA at the Google Developer Group conference in December. So yeah, it's very light, so it didn't turn up, which is fine because then we can just, it's Utah.js. So today we're going to cover a bunch of different things, kind of the background of where everything came up. So I came up with the example use case for an extension that you might have as a company, and one of the goals of the presentation is kind of to make you think about a business case for your products. So be thinking about like what your employer or your organization that you work for, what kinds of things could they make a web extension for? It doesn't have to be a product, but it could be something that supports product. Especially with single page apps, if people are using your app, but they're also using other websites that kind of complement, then that might be a good opportunity for you to create a web extension. So we'll talk about where it's available. Like I said, it's even available in Opera and Edge. And we'll talk about the business case that I came up with. On the demo, we'll actually just walk through the extension, and we'll cover just the basic API for each of the features, and then go into the code that actually runs the demo. We'll also talk a little bit about tooling, how you need to set things up to actually create these, and then any questions or answers. And feel free to ask questions during the talk as well. So you may not have heard of the WebExtensions API because it's pretty new, and it actually came from a W3C group. Now, it's not a W3C standard, but it's a working group that has been around for about 4 years. And the goal of it is to have the same code for extensions run in multiple browsers, which is really cool because that's what we're all trying to get to with single page apps, and the new standards are bringing all the browsers to be very similar. So now with web extensions, you can also create extensions that work across browsers, which is fantastic. They really thought through the security aspects of it. So the things that you can do in your extension are pretty well locked down, which is great because some of the old APIs, you would code to it, and then they would realize, well, there's a security problem with that, and then they'd kind of kill that API or cripple it. And so then your extension, you have to rethink how it would work. I don't remember what that is. Oh, yes. If you're searching for web extensions on the internet, make sure you do it like this with no space in between web and extensions, and you'll find tons of stuff on it. So I've personally used many Firefox and Chrome extensions over the years, but I've never given much thought to how they worked. I kind of think of Internet Explorer in the early 2000s, where you have all these toolbars come up, and so you kind of have this icky feeling about extensions. And hopefully they're getting a better name because there's a lot of really good ones, especially developer extensions. There's tons of those that you've probably used. It's a secret, difficult art that I wasn't really interested in getting into, and it's actually really scary because the whole landscape is huge, and there's all these different technologies that the browsers have used before web extensions, and probably half of these you haven't even heard of. And then the PP API is the Pepper plugin. Like, who knows what Pepper means? And then NPAPI is from Netscape days. So yeah, it's a lot to kind of parse through. And it really kind of feels like magic on some of those. If you ever even looked at the source code on those, it would just look like craziness. And you know, that's exactly what you see on the surface is a great web extension, and then if you look inside, it was really yucky. And you had to import all sorts of APIs that had really gross interfaces, a lot of copy and paste. So this was an example of something that used, you know, some fairly basic stuff with windows and tabs, and that's how you would have to get those into your project. And you'd even have these crazy things where you have to import stuff from your imports at these really weird strings and stuff. So we're glad that we don't have to do that anymore. And then the other problem is that the extensions APIs used to change all the time. We made a small browser extension at Sharper several years ago, and you know, sometimes we'd have time to test like a developer preview edition, you know, like Chrome Canary or Firefox Developer, but it most of the time we just kind of held our breath and hoped that there wasn't something that broke, you know, and to have to dive into that yucky code again. So nowadays we have a lot of support for it. So Chrome supports it, Firefox, even Opera supports it, and even Edge supports it. But there's always an asterisk. If you look at the browser tables at this address on the MDN docs, the support really looks more like this. But the main APIs, the thing that you mostly use, they're all green. So these are like really nitpicky special features of APIs that, you know, you probably don't need to use. So it's really actually pretty nice. So in choosing a target for how far back we wanted to support, the main thing that I was thinking about was we want browsers that already support classes, that already support async functions. And so that takes us all the way back to Firefox 57, so that's plenty good. Chrome 63, that's plenty good. And it turns out that the reason why we can support Opera is because in July of last year they switched to a Chromium engine. And so they've changed their, I think they somehow got some kind of agreement with Chrome, because when you go to the extension store in Opera, it's actually the Chrome store. And of course, we could do Edge 17, really, yes, they really support that. And what's nice about this is you can use all the modern JavaScript features. Like I said, classes, async functions, you get destructuring and spread and REST params and all kinds of really nice things. And you really end up, you could do zero transpiling in your extension, which is really nice. And the other thing you may have heard of is that Microsoft announced that their next version of Edge will be based on Chromium. So we have yet to see how that'll affect, but it's likely that they'll do the actual, you know, Opera way, which is you go to the extensions and it's the Chrome Web Store. So it may be the Chrome Web Store or a subset of the Chrome Web Store, I don't know. Yeah, there'll be even better support. Because right now, Edge 17, there's a couple things that it doesn't support, but they may do that with Edge 18 or 19. I don't know what number it'll be. So what's really nice too is that there's actually this little polyfill that Mozilla came up with, and you can either get it on GitHub or NPM, and the spec actually says that everything is a callback, and Mozilla said, no, that's dumb. So they said, you can give us a callback, but we'll also return a promise. So just like we were talking about promises, Firefox returns promises natively, and the polyfill actually makes all the functions turn into promises for Chrome, Opera, and Edge. So that's nice. And there are just like a few edge case thorns that it handles as well, but mostly it's just, all it does is promisify everything. And it doesn't add any APIs because you can't really emulate, you know, a new feature because it's some API that they don't have yet. So again, think of a business case for your product. The one I'm going to show you is, think about if you're some kind of recruiting software, and you think about the daily activities of a recruiter. They're going to use LinkedIn as part of their workflow. They're going to use G Suite as part of their workflow, for example. Maybe that's, they use Gmail or G Suite as their company email. And so kind of think about, what is your workflow, or what is your user's workflow? So first, let's look at the demo so we have kind of some context about what's happening. And again, this is the address if you want to go see the demo code. All right, so what we've got here is we've installed our extension, and it shows up as this icon over here, Google Developer Group icon. You can see it now. It's not invisible now. Okay. So that's one of the features, is you can add a button there, and it fits in with the Chrome where you can show it or hide it, but it's a button. And then the first thing we're going to talk about is injecting a script. So what we've done is we said anytime there's mail.google.com, we're going to inject a script that we wrote to do something on google.com. So for example, if I click on one of these, what you'll notice is that Google or Gmail does not normally have a little icon right there. What we did is we just added that. We dynamically went into the page and edited it. So there's quite a few limitations on what you can and can't do. You actually cannot read any data on the window. You get a window object, but it's like totally clean, doesn't have any of the other things. But you can do anything with the DOM. So anything that's in the DOM is fair game. You can read that, and you can update the DOM. So in this case, we have found this place in the DOM where a username is, and then we have added our little button here. And when you click the button, we open a new tab, and we go to LinkedIn, and we search. And so you can just see the URL we did right here, and we just put the person's name in the search there, and that's how we constructed the URL. So that's kind of helpful and handy, right? You're emailing someone that's a possible candidate. You can immediately click on that to go try to find them on LinkedIn. The next thing you can do is you can add an omnibox keyword. So I believe it was Chrome that started calling this an omnibox. It's not just a URL bar, it does other things. And what we can do is we can register a keyword or a key letters. So we registered LI, and so when you type in LI and space, what happens is now your extension is going to receive all the key presses from the omnibox, and you can show suggestions or go to the place that they're talking about. So if I look up somebody, then instead of like going to Google, it does my action, and my action is to open up a new tab and to search for this person. Any questions so far? Yeah.
So all that is done with like a content script, or do you have multiple scripts running on that?
Yeah, so we'll show exactly the points that you can plug into. One of them is the Google script, and then you plug into that. Another one is the Omnibox, totally separate. Here's a third one that you can do. You can plug into a right-click menu, and with the right-click menu right here, we've selected some text, and if we right-click on any text that we select, we added this menu item and even have a little logo in there, and you can click on that, and it does the exact same thing. So anywhere you are on the web, you find somebody that's interesting, you just right-click on their name, and now as a recruiter, you could go try to find them. And then, as I mentioned, this icon over here, we added that, and what happens when you click on it, we have our own little page that we can do. So there's all kinds of actions you could do from this. In our case, we're clicking on this icon, brings up our special page that has the recent searches that you did. So you'll notice that the URL is specific to our extension, and we created just an HTML page like this, and we can put whatever information we want on there. So that's another thing you can do. So let us jump into the code. Okay, so again, let me outline. These were the features that we had: the Gmail script, Omnibox keyword, the context menu, so the right-click menu, the clickable icon, and the history page. And the first place that you can register is a content script, and you register for a single domain or a glob, or like a regex of URLs. So you can register it, and then when the user installs it, they'll see a little thing that says this will be able to read your data on, and then it'll say like mail.google.com or whatever places you've registered. So it does tell the user what you're going to try to do. And if you try to do star, like I think it even gives a little bit bigger warning, like you are giving this extension access to read and write all your passwords and all that kind of stuff. So then that content script is something you inject into the Gmail page, and then there is a background script, and that background script is just something that you have complete control over, and it runs just when the browser starts up, and it runs your little code. Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused about that warning. You said that when you're writing this, you don't really have access to anything. It just gives you a blank window object. You just have access to the top. Like, what data do you have access to? I guess I'm a little bit confused by that.
If there's a password input on the page, you can read what's in it.
So the content script can read things. The background script can't, right?
Right, just the content script can. Yeah.
Is it limited to the pages that the extension is registered for? So you mentioned gmail.com.
Yes. Just registered to that one. Whatever you register to. And then the last thing is you can create extension pages, which is that my history page. And that one is kind of just a blank canvas of whatever HTML and JavaScript you want to do. So there's a couple of places where you register things. And there is a manifest.json file that kind of tells what your app does, and that's where you tell it what permissions you want and which domains to put the content script on. And then we'll talk about the Gmail injection. So as we talked about, we're injecting a script that adds that little icon next to a person's name. And in order to get that to run, there's an area called content scripts. And we have just specified one. And this one, we say anytime the URL matches one of these things. So it's mail.google.com/mail/u. So it's a very specific part of Google. So we wouldn't be able to see their username or password. And then you specify what JavaScripts you want to be injected. And you can tell it when to run those. Like in our case, we don't really care too much about the timing. They can kind of run after the page loads. But you can run them like eagerly at the very first or at the end of the head. And then you can also inject whatever CSS you want. And that's kind of how we styled that, that little icon there. So as I mentioned, when you have a content script, you have access to a window that's totally different than the other person's window. It's completely empty. So you can't see any page variables, and the page can't see any of the extension variables. And so that one thing that's nice is you don't need to do any no conflict mode. So if you love doing jQuery or Lodash or something, you don't have to worry about if that page uses a different version of jQuery or Lodash, because your version will be completely different. And you can interact and do anything with the DOM, read to it and write to it. And there are some APIs of the web extension available at a global variable called browser. So you do get a little bit more than just the regular JavaScript. One of the things, for example, is you can send a message to your content script.
To your background script.
Yes, from the content script to the background script, you can send a message. So you first, in the manifest JSON, the main thing you do with the background is you just register what scripts. So you see this first one is the browser Polyfill. That's from Mozilla. And then the background script that we register. And then for the Omnibox keyword, this is really simple because you have this thing called browser, and it has a property called Omnibox. And Omnibox has several events that you can register. One of them is on input entered. And you just add a listener, and all of a sudden you're listening. Every time somebody pushes li space, then you're listening to any key presses there. And you just register what keyword it is in the Omnibox key in the manifest JSON. Yeah?
So that down there in the manifest makes that listener fire after that keyword.
Yes. And it appears that you can only register one. Yeah.
Is that like inside your background script? Because you've got like permissions.
Yes. And then the context menu item is pretty simple as well. Off of browser, there is a thing called context menus, and one of the things is called create. So in this case, we've created a context menu with a certain ID, and then the title, and a thing called contexts. So you can tell it what kinds of right clicks you care about, which is really cool. You can't do that in regular JavaScript. In this case, we only care when somebody has selected text. If they're right-clicking somewhere else, we don't really care.
So will that option not appear on the context menu? Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fancy. And then to add your icon, you just have one icon that you can add, browser.browseraction.onClicked. So the browser action is the icon, and then you specify what the icons look like in the manifest JSON. Up to very big size. I don't know who would have that big of a logo. Maybe super duper retina. I don't know. And so then there is, we talked about the background script that runs the Omnibox keyword and the context item and the clickable icon. The background script here doesn't have access to any of the windows in the browser. It's a completely separate context, so it doesn't have like any global variables that it's available to it. And you can grab all the web extension APIs at browser. And so some of the things that it can respond to is an install. When you first install it, you can do something different. You could phone home and say, hey, somebody install their extension. The first installation, the install startup, when the extension updates and when the browser updates. And then just to talk about our history page, we just create a super simple HTML page. We link to some relative files for the bundle CSS, and we have a main that we're going to put in our table, and we have the scripts that we want to put in. And again, we put that Polyfill from Mozilla, and then we put our bundle in there. So you can, when you create that extension page, our history page in this case, it could be an options page. So if you go to look at your extension, some of them have an options page, so you can add that. Or it could be any page or set of pages that you choose. And it's basically just like a normal web page. You don't have access to any other windows, and you're completely separate space. But you do have access to the browser, and you can AJAX call out anywhere you want to. So let's look at the full code. And actually, I don't even have it up right now. So give me a second. I was just realizing. to see about the size of it. Okay, don't think we need that. All right, is that good size? Maybe a little bigger? Okay, so let's look at the manifest JSON. So the manifest JSON is pretty simple. Like we talked about, you have your name and a version, your icons, any scripts you want to inject, any scripts you want to run when the browser starts up. You define the logo or icon for the button. That's called the browser action, is the button. And just a few other things, Omnibox keyword. And then this is the permissions where you tell what you're going to try to do. And if you install the extension and it doesn't have all the permissions, then when you try to call those APIs, it'll say there's an error. Those don't even exist, so you won't even know about them. Yeah, it doesn't work. Yep.
The web-accessible resources, is that accessible as in accessibility accessible or something?
So what this means is in our Gmail script, we're injecting something. You can't normally display anything from the extension. You have to whitelist and say, I want to be able to put in this logo or this icon. And it's really kind of fancy because it used to be that, well, there's a bunch of security things that this has really helped, but that's really locks things down, so that's nice. So let's talk about.
Is there a way to see this? So for example, if I want to know what actions I plug in, is there a way to see that?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is if you go to the places where Chrome or Firefox has installed it, you can view the source of anything. Yeah, it's completely open. They're in, sometimes it, I think well, let me look real quick. No, it doesn't have it in here. For package, yeah.
Stuff is displayed on the extension page.
The permissions I know are, but I don't ever remember seeing the matches.
Like, not everybody does that. But, if you want to be able to access websites, you need to be able to say, these are the websites this content is going to access.
Yep. Yep. So when you do the build, it builds a zip file, and the zip file basically has everything that's in this extension directory.
What storage do you have access to?
Storage. You have access to local storage and session storage, but it's completely your own. Like you can't access another page's local storage. Yeah.
Request tabs on that permission. Do you get just like the URLs that are in the tabs? Because you said that you couldn't see the page information. Like, what do you get?
Yeah, tabs allows you to open and close tabs.
Oh.
You can't see content, but you could close it, right?
I think you can close any tag, yes. Any tab, yep. Okay, so let's look at the first thing, the Gmail script. Okay, so first here's the Gmail injection. There's quite a lot of comments here, so hopefully it's a helpful thing. I guess we don't need that big. So first of all, we get the little logo that we put next to the user's name, and this is how you get a URL to that logo. One of the things that we do with this is that it's just very naive. Every 1 second, it checks to see if you have opened up a new email message, right, and injects that. There's other things you could do to see if that was open. But again, we don't have access to like any events of, the script did this. We can only we can listen to DOM mutation events, which would probably be a better way. But this is really easy. We're just gonna So every 1 second, we're going to add links, which basically we say find all the selector where it is this person's name looks like this selector, So we just find those, and we add a link, and we say if it was processed, and then we just return. Otherwise, we go in here and we check just a thing in Google's DOM to see if it's that, and we get the name, which is like the actual person's name that allows us to construct the LinkedIn, and then we add in our little A with the background of that little icon, and we attach a listener to our A, so when it's clicked, then we record the search. And that's interesting. Oh, yeah. Maybe oh, yes, here we go. This is better. Okay, so this is that. That's easier to read. Okay, I was wondering why the comments were funny. The other one is the built version. Okay, so let's next look at the Omnibox. So this is pretty easy. So, like I said, you just register a listener for the input. In this case, we're only caring about when they press enter. So on input entered is what we're listening for. We construct the search URL based on the person's name. And then there is this thing, which is a little bit more advanced, is, I don't know how many people do this, but if you're searching in the Omnibox, you can press Shift Tab to open in a new window, or you can just press Shift Enter, new window, Shift, same window, and there's also one for a background tab. So it kind of depends on your browser settings and what you actually press enter with. It could be 3 different things. So in each case, with the current tab, that's what I always do. It updates the current tab's URL. Otherwise, you would create a new tab, or you can create a new tab and put it in the background. And then we just record the search. Questions?
Can you back up a second? So on the last example, you said where you can get the name. How did you get the name? Do you know?
Yeah, so right here, if we go to Gmail and we do so it found a lot of names, 267 names on here. So like this one, you can see it has an email attribute and a name attribute. Yeah. So it depends on the website, you know, if so if this is a really critical extension, then what you probably want to do is have some kind of regularly running unit test that checks if anything broke. Yeah, I'm looking at Walter because we wrote a bunch of tests and we don't run them regularly. Yeah, if they change their site, you've got to do something. So, yeah, so let's go back to code. So the next one we talk about is the icon. So the icon is super simple. When you click on it, all we do is we create a new tab, and the URL is this search history URL that we have, our own URL. And then the last one is the history page itself. So I've created this directory called pages, and in it, search history. And this is super simple. So basically, I just call a render function, and this might look a little bit like React, but I'm just building HTML using template strings, which turns out you can actually use template strings instead of template strings. So that's why it kind of looks like React, but it's just super simple. And then we render, and then we also add a button for that clear button. When you click on it, we clear the history. And when you clear the history, and then we render it. So, any other questions before I talk about the tooling?
So, if you want this functionality in other web applications, what does that take?
Yeah, so you'd have to go to another webmail provider and find out what their DOM looks like and write a script to work with their DOM.
So you use the terminal when you put that URL match.
Yeah, so if we go back to,
That's the strategy we use for our extension. Where there are some common page elements, but a lot of
yeah,
not webmail, but article providers.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we made a web extension that when you click on the icon, it scrapes the title and the text of an article and then allows you to save that. So our matches is, I think we just match on everything. And then I'm not sure how we did it.
No, we only have to match our URLs.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember how.
It's magic. But yeah, so this one block would be for Google or Gmail, and then you could add a different one for Hotmail or what other
There's
things
sort
you
of a
want.
way to do kind of a user agent on webmail.
So the user agent's always the browser. So
I mean, like, that same concept. Instead of what browser they're using, what webmail they're using.
yeah, what page they're on. Yeah, yeah,
And from there, it's just a matter of knowing the DOM elements are and grab that.
yeah, yeah. And so the reason why Walter brought that up is because if you look at sites like CNN and MSNBC and all those, they actually have a pattern that they follow that tells you how to, find the paragraphs that are actually text. And then some of them you have to be tricky and filter out the ad paragraphs.
So with your icon, is that like a page action or a browser action?
The browser action, yeah. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the package, Jason. So the only kind of funny thing that we do here is that we take the web extension that comes in the NPM and we actually move it to the place that will get bundled up with the actual extension. To build, we're just using Webpack and have a little script that actually bumps the version because you can submit it to the Chrome Web Store or the Firefox add-on store, and you have to always have a new version. Both of those stores, they have pretty automatic approval. They have scripts that just read your source code and look for anything that looks suspicious. So I don't think there's a human involved most of the time. Was it on Firefox, maybe?
They asked for we submitted, one of the things we submitted was still modified.
Yes, that's true. So
They were like, we need that.
yes, so that is one thing that's interesting. If you submit to Mozilla, you don't want to minify. So it's actually,
Very careful.
yeah. So if you get another library from, you refer to it in NPM, then you want to take it like wholesale and not do the minified version, but do the development build because they want to see it. And you can see like here's some built files, and it's pretty readable. I mean, you can see this Webpack stuff before, but this is really similar to the code that we wrote. So, it's got class names, for example, or const, and it's nice. So to actually get it into bundles, there's basically just some zip calls that you do. And with Firefox, they're more interesting because they want to see your source files. And so we have to say, give the parent directory, but just take out a bunch of stuff like the README and the package JSON and our test files and stuff like that. So they want to see the whole thing. This is kind of interesting.
They want to see everything that's being delivered to the user.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, it's fairly straightforward once you get Babel going. And I've actually recently started using Parcel. And if you've ever seen that, it is really, really nice. So I recommend it as an alternative to Webpack. There's zero configuration. It just does all of the Webpack things that you would normally think you want to do. Yeah. It detects if you're using React and it automatically puts that stuff in. Let's see. Okay, last thing I wanted to show you is how to look at the consoles of things. So if we come into the extensions. So let's talk about how I got it in here. So normally when you come to this extensions page, it's not in developer mode. You have to put it in developer mode, and then it allows you to load an unpacked extension, which means when I'm testing things out, I just change my code and it automatically is already updated. It's super nice. It used to be that you would have to say rebuild, it would kill your window, it would start up the browser again. It was just like this horrible thing. So now WebExtensions makes it super nice.
Is there a way to turn off the notification every time you open up Chrome? Saying that it's unsafe for that development?
Oh, I don't know.
That's what I
Use Chrome Canary instead. Canary for development. Okay, so what I did is I just picked a directory to load unpacked extension from. In this case, it was just our extension directory. And we get this thing here. We can inspect view. Let's see, let's make that a little smaller. So here we go. So there's two views that we can inspect. One is the search history, which is this page, which we can always just do this to inspect it. And then the other one is our background page. So that's kind of cool. So you can see some, let's see, browser. So we can see browser, and here's all the different APIs that you can do. So that's pretty nice. So if there's any errors that come up,